Welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. Michael, Mo, Tim, and the occasional guest discussing analytics issues of the day and periodically using explicit language while doing so. Find them on the web at analyticshour.io and on Twitter at analyticshour. And now, the Digital Analytics Power Hour.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about the persona of our typical show listener. We'll call her Jerry. She's 5'10". She shops at Saks Fifth Avenue, Nordstrom's. She drives, probably a Tesla. Very intelligent. Yeah, pretty mobile. Yeah, that's kind of our typical pot. What do you think, Tim? Am I nailing that persona?
I think so. I mean, I think as we become more and more customer-centric as a podcast, it's those sorts of personas that are really going to help us tailor our message. Once we go back with like full-on live episodes, I think that's the sort of thing we could...
There's so much value in demographics.
We had entirely too much fun listening to this episode.
Okay, yes, we certainly did. All right, so to catch everyone up, yes, we still are on hiatus. Tim Wilson, Senior Director of Analytics at Search Discovery, is here with me. I'm Michael Helbling, the founder of Stacked Analytics. And of course, we're still lacking our third co-host, Mo, who is doing well, though. Tim, do you have an update from the field?
I get enough little exchanges with her that she clearly is she is sleep deprived, but also finding time to do little side projects that occasionally spill over into our world. So I don't know. There's part of me hoping maybe we'll get her to pop in for one of these pre-show.
Well, that would be delightful. Anyways, so we're still rebroadcasting some episodes we really liked, and this one was a humdinger. So this was episode 70, which was a discussion of customer centricity and customer lifetime value with Dr. Peter Fader. Dr. Fader's really well known, and he's even written at least one book, maybe 2 or 3 books about this topic now, and has done quite a bit of research in this area. And it was just really cool to talk to him, and listening back, like a lot of the central premise of what he was talking about still holds 100% true today.
Yeah. And I feel like in his book, and I went back and looked it up because it was like, I think originally published in 2012 and then kind of updated in 2020. So we were talking to him in between, and it was called Customer Centricity. And even this episode kind of opens with him saying that might have been a bad name, which reminded me why the title of the episode was Customer Lifetime Value. But it is actually, I look back, that was from when we recorded it till now, and I kind of reflect on how my career and understanding has kind of evolved since then. And it was a good re-listen because there are some things that he was saying that I understand more about how you do these. I remember really enjoying the show at the time because it was kind of a mindset. I mean, it's a little weird to kind of re-listen to yourself, but he is so passionate about the topic and has such depth of thought on it. I wonder if he was like re-listen to it, he'd be like, no, I've got more thoughts since 2017. I'm sure he does, but
well, I mean, just in terms of what's happened with him since that recording, I mean, he founded a company, I think they're called Zodiac or Zodiac Partner or something like that.
Zodiac Metrics, I think.
Okay, Zodiac
and
Metrics.
He mentions it in fact. He's like, now that I have this startup, and I was
right.
Like, what?
And what he was doing was basically working with companies to develop these customer-centric models. Well, that company was promptly bought up by Nike. Nike acquired that, and then he and another research partner of his have now formed another company, I think Theta Equity Partners, which is taking the idea of customer lifetime value and starting to position it as a way to evaluate certain kinds of companies from a valuation perspective. So like for investment and things like that. So it's sort of like, there's certain ways we look at company valuations, but if you could look at it from a customer perspective, and I don't know a lot about it, but maybe that's a use case for another episode at some point.
I will say there's one part we should probably call out that didn't age well. There was one hilarious part in your last call, and then there was a part that maybe didn't age super, super well.
I think I know what you're going to talk about.
We did have a little bit of a discussion about Facebook, and I was down on Facebook even at the time, and sort of called out that Facebook was great and did some amazing modeling, and that prompted a little bit of a research to sort of place in the timeline of Facebook. So this episode was recorded in 2017. So it was after the Cambridge Analytica shenanigans had happened, but it was before those stories kind of broke. I do think that's the part that maybe hasn't aged super well. Not just Cambridge Analytica, but kind of where Facebook sits and what they can do.
Well, and you know what else sort of sprung to mind? Because at that time, I was not as aware of what Facebook asked advertisers for in terms of metrics. But they completely want RFM level data, all of your purchase, so when it happens, who it happens with, and how much. What are their models exactly? There's probably a huge honking component that's just RFM related. So anyways, very fascinating. I think the conversation definitely holds up, and it's a pleasure to represent this one. So with a deep dive into demographic data and personas, not really though, this is episode number 70. Do you believe in life after love? Or do you believe in loving a brand for life? Or if you are a brand, how do you measure the love that your customers have for you? This is all a roundabout way of asking, how do you think about customer lifetime value? And maybe more importantly, how do you build your organization into one with customer centricity? I'm pretty sure in all of that, we're going to find some analytics to talk about as well. As always, I am joined by my co-hosts, Mo Kiss. Hello, Mo.
Hi, Michael. How you going?
I'm going great. No, wait. What's the appropriate going greeting?
I feel like one of these days I need to come in with "G'day, mate."
Well, no. How you going that's not a typical United States greeting, so I'm going to attribute that to the Australianness.
Sure.
We'll work on it later. All right. And Tim Wilson, welcome back to the show, Tim.
Where are you doing?
So long. What are you doing? Why are you here? And I'm Michael Helbling. And to help bring a little light to this topic, we went straight to the top of the food chain to find our guest. He is Dr. Peter Fader. He's one of the world's foremost thought leaders in customer lifetime value. His research and mathematical models are valued by both startups and Fortune 500 companies. He's a graduate of MIT. He's a professor at the Wharton School. He has more than 25 years of experience as a consultant to many of the world's leading brands across many industries. He's also the author of Customer Centricity, Focus on the Right Customers for Strategic Advantage. Welcome to the show, Pete.
It's great to be with you, and I guess I'm obligated to give you the Philly greeting. How you doing?
How you doing? See, that one I'm familiar with. Yeah. I've actually traveled enough to New York City and Philadelphia areas, like I can pull off a little bit of a, and I'm walking here.
You just equated New York and Philly, so I'm sure you just alienated a signal.
Yeah, it's all the same thing. Boston, New York, Philly, it's all the same basic thing.
Not to us.
Yeah, we'll get some comments about that probably. All right, so let's get things going. So I think maybe the first thing would be really great for us to understand or talk to about our listeners is sort of a definition of customer centricity.
Sure thing. Because it's not what the listeners think. And I think it was a mistake on my part to use that as the title of the book and the label overarching everything I do. Because to a lot of people, customer centricity means super duper customer service. The customer is always right. The customer is at the center of everything we do. And no, that's not what I'm talking about at all. I think that's naive. I think that's disrespectful both to the managers within the company as well as the customers. It can't be implemented. We have to acknowledge that not all customers are created equal. That's just the reality of it. Some of them are really good. Some of them are In fact, a lot of them are And so our ability to understand those differences and leverage them, and in fact, in particular, to put, I hate to say it, but I mean it, disproportionate attention on the really good ones, that's customer centricity. So it's not just being centered around the customer, it's being centered around the right customers, while at the same time being mindful of those other ones out there that might not constitute a lot of revenue on an individual basis, but collectively they're still pretty important to us.
Yeah, I love that, because picking the right customer actually defines you as a business too.
It really does. And in the same ways, in the old days, it used to be, are we going to be all about the product, or are we going to be all about efficiency? In this new era, it's going to be, which customers are we going to be all about? And then the products that we develop and the services that we offer and all that stuff is auxiliary to that choice of who those focal customers are.
On that point, I guess I'm interested to hear a little bit about, if you're focusing on the customers that are the highest value, I guess, quote unquote, your good customers, are you potentially missing some learnings about what leads to a bad customer experience so that you can then fix those things as well?
Yeah, it's a really important point. I'm glad you're putting that up front, because sometimes this general point doesn't come up in a conversation, or sometimes it's at the very end. I seem to be laying out this kind of black and white, good and bad customer dichotomy, and I don't mean to do that at all. I mean, I am serious about putting disproportionate amount of attention and resources on the good customers, but that doesn't mean it's zero for the other customers. And for most businesses, like I said before, if it's an 80-20 rule, then, those 80% of the so-so customers are collectively still kind of important. So maybe you're not going to be quite as responsive to them. Maybe when you're developing new products and services, you don't want to take their pulse quite as much as you want to really focus in on those good customers. But you do kind of want to know what's up with them, and you do want to know if there's anything systematic that's going to chase a lot of them away, and if there are some cost-effective ways to keep them happy. I think it's worth doing that. It's just that you don't want to prioritize those so-so customers over the really valuable ones. So somewhere in the book and in all this stuff that I talk about, I discuss the paradox of customer centricity, and it kind of goes like this. The more that we zoom in on those really valuable customers, the more that we really have that insight and the ability to know who they are, in a weird way, the more that we need those so-so customers just to have stability, just to have predictability, just to keep the lights on in the business. So we kind of need them. We need to be, having a cost-effective conversation with them. We're happy to have a relationship with them, but it's just going to be a bit more on our terms than theirs when we compare them to the more valuable customers.
So if you were making decisions about a product roadmap or a marketing initiative, or say like a loyalty program, and you upweight, I suppose, the feedback from those good customers, is the goal about, by focusing on them, to increase the overall number of good customers? Because I noticed in one of the articles that you've written, you mentioned about like not wasting time trying to move people that have had a bad experience to making them have a good experience. But how do you increase the number of good customers if you're not at some point focusing on like these bad customers or whatever, quote unquote, didn't have a great experience, and these are the reasons why, and this will help us get more of those high value customers?
Sure thing. So there's actually two really good points there. So one is this kind of quantity versus quality trade-off, and then I want to go back to what you said at the outset about the product roadmap. But first, it's kind of strange, but we need, look, acquiring customers is rarely throwing spears and catching whales. Usually it's throwing nets out there, recognizing that most of the customers we get are so-so ones. We just hope that we can get a better yield of better customers every time we throw the nets. So it's just getting a little bit better about how we acquire customers, but it's still going to be a quantity game. And again, most of the customers, not only that we have today, but even the ones that we're going to acquire tomorrow, are going to be merely so-so. That's the reality of it. And I think it's important to recognize that we're still throwing nets pretty broadly, even when we get real smart, because it's going to be, in most cases, impossible to know exactly where those good customers reside. So, for instance, down there in Australia, there's a lot of noise being made by my friend Byron Sharp about how brands grow and how important it is to increase penetration for a company. I agree with that, but for a different kind of reason. For me, penetration, having a broad customer base, isn't an end unto itself, But the kind of broader we're out there searching for the right kinds of customers, the easier it's going to be for us to kind of know where they reside in that ocean of customers. So we're always going to continue to go broadly. And as we do so, we're going to look at those so-so customers and we're going to say, what makes them different than the really good ones? And so we can basically avoid over acquiring them. So we do want to know about them and kind of what makes them tick. And let me give the positive spin on it. To the extent that the so-so customers are aligned with the good customers, like let's go back to the product roadmap now. I don't like the idea of a product roadmap. I want a customer roadmap. The products that we develop will be kind of a natural offshoot of the decisions we make about which kinds of customers we want to go after. So we're going to go after certain kinds of customers. That is going to drive the kinds of product decisions we make. But we hope that while we come up with products that are going to be really, really appealing to the good customers and attract more of them, we're hoping that the so-so customers like them as well. That would be icing on the cake. So we really do care about the so-so customers, but just not quite in the same way. And again, when it comes to product roadmaps, when you say words like that, it shows that you're not thinking customer-centrically or
heaven forbid, if somebody had a title called product analyst, that would be a nightmare. So
I do confess I work in the product team, so...
Yep, that's it, Mo. You're off the show. It's
gone.
We tried, but not customer-centric.
So there's like a fundamental kind of confusion. So if you're casting a net and you bring in all these customers, how do you know from purchase number one which ones are good and which ones are so-so? Like, how do you...
Well, for a startup, we don't. So we have to wait some amount of time to really see their goodness manifest. Part of my job is to figure out how little data and how little time do we need to wait in order to do that. But the other part of the job is, what can we leverage from our previously acquired customers that's going to give us a pretty good sense about this just acquired customer to know whether he or she is a good one or not? So, for instance, every time we acquire a customer, let's look at every possible characteristic, every possible descriptor that we get of that initial purchase. So when did we acquire that person? Through what channel? What was the first product that they bought from us? What campaign did they respond to? Even bring in demographics. I'm fine with that. And on the basis of all those descriptors, see how close they resemble other customers that we have. In some sense, come up with a weighted average of all of our existing customers to say, here's our initial best guess about this just acquired customer. And if this customer seems to have all the right characteristics, then that's great. We'll put them right in the red carpet, gold medal, blue ribbon club, even though we don't have a lot of information about them. So I think that's a really interesting challenge.
Well, so it's like a lookalike model, but you have to start by saying, take my historical data set, figure out who my best ones are. There may be 3 or 4, 27 different combinations of characteristics, but it is truly about kind of a modeling exercise so that then when somebody comes in, you can start being kind of probabilistic as to how valuable they will be.
Absolutely. And I'll be the first to admit that when it comes to all of the fun things that we can do with customer lifetime value, number one on most people's list would be to use that as the basis for lookalike modeling. And with a lot of the companies that I work with, showing how we can move the needle by doing lookalike modeling on the basis of CLV instead of other, lesser characteristics, that's what really opens their eyes and says, okay, now tell me the 49 other fun things to do. So that is, it's a great point to be raising early, and just helping companies recognize that and to do it the right way is really important, because then all the other benefits follow from there.
So what would you say to someone who's like, hey, Apple didn't follow a customer-centric model, right? Steve Jobs was like the product. No, but I'm asking a loaded question because I think a lot of people out there would kind of be like, well, Henry Ford said, if they asked customers what they wanted, they'd want a faster horse. So then in a customer-centric mindset, like, there is an answer to this, and I think that's what I want to kind of give people a bridge so they don't have to feel like there's a choose a side.
Well, you know
kind
what?
of a sense to
I'll
that.
help you build that bridge, but first I'll pick up on the very last point, Michael, which is to say I think you do have to choose. I think a company has to decide what its fundamental strategy is going to be. Are you going to be a product leader? We are the best at what we sell, and Apple is the exemplar of that. Are we going to focus on operational efficiency, that, man, we just turn the crank really well and keep the cost down? Amazon, Walmart, Zara, I mean, companies that are just really good at getting stuff out there. Or are we going to be customer-centric? I don't think the customer centricity is the right strategy for every company. I think it's the right strategy for maybe a third of the companies. And if you are finding great success as an Apple, tremendous, stay with it. But here's the thing. Eventually it does commoditize. Eventually it does plateau. That's what's starting to happen to Apple today. And the problem is too many other companies emulate them when they shouldn't be. I'm going to tell you a specific story. I'm going to name names over here. So at some point in this conversation, we're surely going to talk about Net Promoter Score. And we can get to that for listeners who aren't familiar with it. We'll fill in the blanks on it. But I was giving a keynote talk for Bain Consulting, the originators of NPS. I was giving a keynote at their NPS Loyalty Forum a couple of years ago. And I'm giving all of this stuff about how, and it picks up on this, the earlier part of the conversation, we have to understand what makes the promoters different from the detractors. And instead of trying to turn the detractors into promoters, let's just find more promoters. Let's just get smart about it. And people are kind of, nodding their heads and they're with me. And then the woman sitting over there in the front row speaks up. And it's Angela Arendts, the person who runs Apple Retail. And she says, at Apple, that's not how we do it. At Apple, we want to delight everybody, or something like this. We're going to find what ails those detractors, and we're going to fix it. And so all of a sudden, she's completely turned the room. Everybody is now nodding their heads at what she said. But I'm not going to give up on this. So I say to her, with all due respect, and I really do mean that, because I have tremendous amount of respect for Apple, but every other company in the room, you're not Apple, and you never will be. And so trying to follow the Apple strategy and emulating the Apple tactics is not going to work for you. So for this is going to be great for Apple, and that's terrific, because you will have customers lining up around the block every time you launch a product, and they don't even know anything about it. But the rest of you don't have that, and you're never going to have that, until you have that, you got to listen to me instead. And it's going to be, focusing on those better customers, recognizing that those so-so ones are born that way and are probably going to stay that way. And you really got to focus on those differences instead. So for Apple, great credit to them. But it is kind of interesting that I'm starting to get a few more emails and things every now and again. It's clear that they're reading some of my papers and they're asking me some technical questions and they're asking me about some of the dance steps of customer centricity. So that doesn't mean they're going to abandon product leadership, but it means they do need to kind of shore up some of their weaknesses on the customer-centric dimension.
Just on the Net Promoter Score, I'm curious to hear your views about why customer lifetime value. If we're talking about being customer centric, why isn't a customer happiness metric appropriate? Because doesn't a happy customer mean someone who's more likely to be brand loyal, someone who's more likely to come back? I'm just, curious to hear.
Well, I have, I don't even call it a love-hate relationship, but I have probably more love for NPS than any other academic. Most academics hate NPS because it is such a simple measure. And a lot of my colleagues in the field of marketing have been developing these elaborate, very carefully validated customer satisfaction schemes over the years with, 100 questions. And then this one question comes along, will you recommend us? And it kind of blows them all out of the water. So everyone just loves to hate NPS. I actually love it for a number of reasons. Number one, and in no particular order, but what the heck. Number one is the fact that it celebrates heterogeneity. The fact that instead of looking at an average satisfaction score, we're looking at the differences. We recognize there are some who love us, some who don't, and it's the difference across them that really indicates how well we're doing. So I love that. Number two, I love the fact that the simplicity makes it very comparable, so we can really see how we're doing for different kinds of segments of customers or different geographies or different product lines. And number three, maybe the most important reason, is that it is the first time that a customer metric has really gained the attention of CEOs and other C-level people. So for me, NPS is kind of a foot in the door to get them to actually care about customers, to get them to appreciate differences across customers, and to get them to ask other kinds of questions about it. So I'm fine with Net Promoter Score. And really, to your point, Mo, having an attitudinal metric as a complement to a kind of financial, behavioral CLV metric, I think is a great thing. Again, I developed the world's best CLV models, but I'm the first to admit that they're still incomplete, and there are still aspects of what's going on inside the customer's head that aren't necessarily reflected in those metrics. So the ultimate thing is to have both, is to have the behavioral metric that's just looking at transactions, but having some kind of attitudinal metric, whether it's NPS or something else, that might either align with it or pick up some other aspects of it. So I really spend a lot of time talking to companies about trying to, now that you got NPS, now let's just slide CLV in there as well, not necessarily as a replacement for NPS.
I actually think I completely agree with you. Our number one company KPI is our NPS. And what I do find difficult about that is that it's really an output metric. It's so far down the funnel. We send our NPS survey quite late after a customer's purchased. Like having something a little bit more tangible. And also, I agree in having some kind of monetary value is important. So I think that's a really good suggestion to have the two complement each other.
And I'm so happy to say, first of all, I'm glad that you agree, but I'm so happy to say that a lot of companies on their own have been coming to me saying, we got the NPS thing, we've been drinking that Kool-Aid, we understand how good it can be, but we know there's more. So can you help us bring CLV in as well? So I think that NPS has done a really great job of just elevating companies' awareness of what kinds of metrics they need, and it's created demand for CLV that just wouldn't exist if the folks at Bain, Fred Reichheld in particular, hadn't done all that great work, 15, 20 years ago.
But is there that fundamental that the way to move the NPS score is to, increase promoters and decrease detractors, and you generally think really weight more towards the get more promoters and do more with your promoters? Is that a fair?
Yeah, it is a fair statement, and it's the biggest problems that I find. I'm glad to give you the whole list of issues of why people kind of throw things at me and disagree. But this could be number one on the list. The idea that I'm basically being so fatalistic about it and saying, they're bad customers, live with them. A lot of companies take that personally. It means it's a failing of them as people or as corporations, that we can't turn these ugly ducklings into beautiful swans. Now, let me first clarify my position by saying I recognize that customer development, the improving of our existing customers, is absolutely part of the holy trinity of customer centricity: customer acquisition, customer retention, and customer development. We are going to try. All the time we're going to be asking questions. Do you want fries with that? Do you want to supersize it, to cross-sell and upsell? But in most cases, those development activities are going to be kind of transient. They're going to be opportunistic. They're not going to be transformational. They're not going to be turning the ugly ducklings into beautiful swans. And you know what? Even at times when they do appear to be transformational, my view is, and the data seems to support this, that those customers were actually born good. They were good all the time, but you just didn't put the right kinds of products in front of them. You didn't respond to their needs. You were undervaluing them because of managing the relationship poorly, and you finally opened up and unlocked the value that existed with them all the time. So too often companies are patting themselves on the back for those transformations when they occur. Look, I will acknowledge that there will be some customer dynamics over time. The classic story in financial services where someone starts with the student loan, and then they get the car loan, then they get the mortgage, then the home equity line, then the boat loan. I mean, there will be some growth in customers over time, but it's not as easy to orchestrate that or to make it happen over a short period of time than what a lot of companies believe.
So another sort of nagging question I have is, how of the companies, the organizations you're working with that are embracing or even have the potential to shift, where does CPG, where does packaged goods or FMCG for the European?
CPG, FMCGs, they make me so sad. Because there are a few sectors out there that have the real desire, the real willingness to do this. And they're always trying initiatives here and there, whether it's let's get some kind of social media thing going on so we can start developing direct relations with our customers. Hey, let's get a loyalty program going. Hey, let's put in-store tracking this or that. Or, hey, let's go out there and spend $1 billion and buy, a Dollar Shave Club that's probably not even worth half of that. Let's just do things so we can start to kind of get in the game as well. And it's really hard for them because putting aside their current customers, retailers, to the extent that they can be customer-centric with their end users, which is what they aspire to do, it's really, really, really difficult. So they have all these smart people, and they're really trying all these hard things. But then I turn around and look at the idiots that we call retailers, who have good data, who have the capability to offer different kinds of products and services, who have the ability to just do all of this stuff, and they're just too lazy, risk-averse, cheap, stupid to actually do it. So I really feel for the CPGs who want to but aren't yet in a position, and it just makes me even more angry about the retailers who just have this golden gift that the CPGs would die for, and they don't take full advantage of it.
So at this point, I might confess that I work for a retailer.
Well, not all retailers are lazy, dumb, and stupid, and I'm not saying that about their employees.
Just U.S. retailers
on
now.
the product team as a product analyst.
Just giving you a hard time. But I actually, funnily enough, I wanted to talk a little bit about online retail, particularly in e-commerce. Does this whole view of customer centricity and this approach, does it really start with single customer view? Because I know that we're totally online. One of the difficulties, if someone's coming into a store, it's a little bit different. It's a person, they have a loyalty card or whatever it is. In the online space, particularly, people will have multiple accounts, multiple email addresses. Is part of understanding their value to the business, starting with that outset of how do we actually get that single view of a customer across devices, across accounts? What are your thoughts on that?
So you asked specifically, is that the starting point? So let me get to that in a second. But is that single view of the customer essential? Yes, it is. Is it the starting point? Not necessarily. So it could be, look, the starting point is kind of just getting the mindset around all this stuff, that this is what we want to do. Here's how we're going to design the organization to do so. Yes, at some point we're going to have that single view of the customer to really act on it. But you know what? If a company wants to start with some kind of proxy measure for customer lifetime value, even if it's Net Promoter Score, that's fine with me. Let's just kind of get some placeholder in there just so we can get going with it. And let's think of course, the king of online retailing, Amazon. When Jeff Bezos got that company off the ground, his objective was to find rich people. And he admits this. There was a really nice interview with him recently. He said he wanted to find rich people because he had the sense that would be a good proxy measure for what we call CLV. He's not that right about it, but he had nothing. So let's start with a proxy measure, and let's think about products that will disproportionately appeal to the rich people, books. And that's really what led to the whole Amazon story. So I'm fine if a company doesn't necessarily start with that single view, but that really does have to be on the roadmap pretty early on. And I really worry because a lot of companies grossly underinvest in that single view in CRM systems. They're trying to look at, let's say, CRM as an end unto itself. Will this system pay for itself? And the answer is, well, no. But will clean bathrooms pay for themselves? No. It's just something that a company just has to do. And the value of it will show up once we start to see and leverage the CLVs. So yeah, we have to get there. Yeah, we have to get there pretty early. Yeah, we have to do it in a smarter way. It's not just some kind of function that's way down in the organization. The CMO himself or herself should really, really care about that instead of worrying so much about just the brand. I think it is mission critical in a way that most companies, not just retailers, don't fully appreciate.
Yeah. So on you touched a little bit before on demographics, and
you should be keen to avoid it.
The reason I say that is because people continually ask analysts for what is our average customer? What is the persona of our typical customer? And I mean, how does that really conflict? And what are the dangers here if you're trying to be customer centric, but lots of people are coming in with that mindset of, oh, we're trying to be customer centric, so the first thing we're going to do is look at demographics. We're going to look at, our typical customer. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I do. In fact, you see the hairline here? You see how it's all working its way back? That's because of demographics. I'm just pulling it out from all these companies that, A, don't get it in the first place, but B, even after I educate them about, it really is about what they do, not what they look like. They say, okay, that's great, that's good. Now tell me about the demographic. No, let's stop. Look, in the 1950s, when the only thing we could measure about our customers is what they looked like, that made all the sense in the world. That's the only way that we could put people in buckets. And we would start with those demographically oriented buckets, and we'd say, which of those buckets is best? Which of those buckets is a best fit for us? We're going to produce these products. We're very product-centric. But which one of those demographic buckets just seems to be the best fit with the products we are going to produce anyway? I mean, that's the way companies operated. That's the way companies still operate. It's just a shame. That's just this legacy mindset that persists today. Here's the role of demographics. Put them aside, at least for starters. Let's start with meaningful measures or indicators of customer value. First and foremost, it's what they do. It's recency, frequency, monetary value. It's behavior. It's transactions. I have no problem bringing into that mix attitudinal variables like Net Promoter Score or just other things about wants and needs and frustrations that might not be picked up in the behavior. I have no problem bringing in social type variables like where are you located in the social graph, and if you're surrounded by high value customers, then we should maybe treat you well too, even if you haven't manifested that value. After we do all of that, after we come up with our CLVs, then we can bring in the demographics. Then we can bring in the personas. Then we can bring in all the other old school variables to say, now that we see the CLVs, are there demographic differences between the high and low value ones? The answer is usually not. But if there are, then I'm totally fine to seize upon them.
At least it's not Tim for once.
And last piece of this rant, before I pull some more hair out, is I recognize that even after we wave our magic wand and see the CLVs across all of our customers, we need to go to the salespeople and just to even to the folks coming up with our marketing messages, and we can't just say, go after those people and these are the ones to leave alone. We need to come up with some kind of tangible description. So I'm actually, in a weird way, okay with personas as long as they're driven by customer lifetime value. So, what is the stereotype that makes these customers different than these customers over here? And even if it's not perfect, even if it doesn't perfectly describe those customers uniquely and exclusively, if it's just going to be an approximation that steers some of our resources in the right direction, I'm okay doing that as a starting point. Because, again, we're chucking nets, not spears. And so as long as we can just get a little bit better about the direction of them, demographics can help us do that, but it shouldn't be the starting point.
Well, and it seems like the persona exercise, if you have that customer lifetime value data to develop your persona, that's forcing you to sort of think through who are the customers that are most valuable to you, which ultimately that whole value of describing personas so that the creative team has something tangible in their mind. But that does seem like a shift. It's not, you're not describing this 15 to 27-year-old female living in rural areas. You're describing something more from a lifetime value perspective.
That's right. Exactly right. Okay. So again, I'm fine layering the personas on to bring the CLVs to life, but that's very different than the way a lot of companies pursue it, which is they just kind of make stuff up that we want. Busy Betty, working Wanda, professional Paula, whatever it is. They just make these things up based on just a purely stereotypical guess about their customer base. And the problem is by my legitimizing personas at all, even when I say it's this limited application for them, once I say it's okay to use personas at all, people take that as the wrong idea and then they run the wrong direction with it. People are so consumed by demographics, and don't even get me started on the whole millennial thing. I mean, and I would have really thought that let's take it back to e-commerce, that thanks to e-commerce, where we really do have the ability to tag and track individuals and really understand how they're different from each other in meaningful ways, that a lot of the demographic and persona stuff would have kind of shriveled up and started to go away by now. It hasn't. It's going as strong as ever before. And I think it's a real problem that e-commerce companies should be kind of leading the way and changing practices, and some of them are. But for the most part, when the company grows big enough and it's time to hire the CMO, they're bringing that person in from P&G or Unilever, and they're kind of bringing the same bad, dumb practices with them. So, and I don't mean that disrespectful to those companies, because for those companies, that's the only thing they can do. But to bring CPG practices into e-commerce is generally not letting you kind of, play your strongest suit.
Or you could be like Walmart and just keep bringing e-commerce into your company.
Walmart is really, really, really interesting in that way because, in my book, I kind of singled out Walmart. Again, not being negative about them, but saying they're pursuing an operationally efficient strategy, so they don't have to worry about the customer-centric thing. But to their credit, we might question the means that they're doing it or the amount of money that they're paying for it, but the fact that they are trying to learn a little bit more about it and move in that direction. It's not only with the acquisitions, but it's even some of the technologies that they're using that I think get much less attention. So, for instance, Walmart does not have a loyalty program. And if you ask them why, they say, because that would be overhead and that would raise our costs and we don't want to do that kind of thing. But what we want to do is to try to get the benefits of a loyalty program without actually having one. So, for instance, let's come up with this, I forget what they call it, Scan and Go or something like that, a mobile app where you actually scan the products in the store, and then when you check out, instead of having everything, pull it out of the cart, put it on the conveyor belt, you just hold up the app and it says, here's all the stuff that you bought. For them, it's labor savings. People get in and out of the store faster, they can hire fewer people, it helps them be more operationally efficient, but at the same time, it gives them the data that they would have from a loyalty program. So Walmart, to their credit, they are taking steps in this direction, and part of it does come through the acquisitions as well. So they're acknowledging the need to kind of beef up that side of the business. They're not there yet, but I'm interested to see how it's going to play out for them.
I wonder if the demographics bent is also being somewhat...
We don't talk about demographics.
Well, I was going to say the other...
Now we're over it.
Well, from the media side of like Facebook, when they're selling advertising, they have the highest volume of gender and age. They know that, and I feel like there's that piece too when it comes to when you're setting up a campaign. They're saying, "Oh, this is the easy thing for you to pick," or it's the thing we feel the most comfortable inferring. So there's a little bit of kind of a unhealthy feedback loop of where they're saying we can target these demographic characteristics much better than we can target, certainly direct customer lifetime value, but also, other characteristics. So
sure. So there's no question Facebook is facilitating bad practices. They're not promoting them, but that's what their advertisers want. They just got to be there for them. But at the same time, let's give Facebook some credit too. Some of the things that they've been doing, some of the algorithms that they developed are really, really good. So first, on the technology side, I'm amazed at how few people are aware of the Atlas technology that they have, which really, has Google and all the other big tech firms worried, because Facebook, it's an amazing piece of technology to really link together behavior across different platforms. And then on the algorithm side, what they're doing with their Facebook lookalikes it's really great. It's actually a lot better than the equivalent service that Google and the others offer. So I don't know what's going on inside that black box, but when I'm working with companies and saying, hey, here's the CLV people, let's go to Facebook and come up with other customers who resemble them, they're doing a pretty good job of that. And so part of that might be demographics, sure, but I think a lot of it is based on other characteristics, and they're kind of finding genuinely good lookalike customers. So Facebook, they get it, but at the same time, they can't completely move away from demographics. They'd be out of business tomorrow.
Well, but it shifts. I can think that's one where like they've got the offer, the product where you can upload a bunch of email addresses and they'll do the matches and it'll all be hashed and protected, and then they'll sort of do a lookalike. But it seems like companies are like, ooh, that's hard and we don't trust it. We're like uploading our customer data to Facebook. So that's where it's like they've sort of enabled it. I also think they've got like some brilliant like data scientists, predictive analytics modelers over, Atlas developing people, and then they've got the people who are doing what analysts get to where they can't actually count a video view correctly and they keep having egg on their face. So it's clearly like two different buildings where one is like so stuck in like 2002 we can't even count a video view, and on the other end they're doing this amazing stuff. But there's my rant.
Yep.
Got one in.
So we've got time for one more question about demographics. No, I'm just kidding.
I actually do have a kind of not demographic-y but related question.
No, you cannot. Okay.
So, Pete, if you're advocating for looking at what customers do instead of who they are, and that's the D word, I wonder if there's a slippery slope, and I, again, have my product hat on here, where you go, okay, good customers, our customers with high CLV, they do these things on our product, right? So let's try and make all of our customers do these things. And I've seen that play out with really dire consequences. How do you reconcile that with instead saying, yes, these are the things that our high value customers do, but we acknowledge that not everyone wants to do them. So let's just build great features that support people to do the things when they want to do them.
So let's, when it comes time to product development, let's not aim for that average. Let's not say, what products can we develop that will be, widely loved? I'm going to give a big shout out to one of my favorite companies that does this oh so well, Electronic Arts, the gaming company. I'm overstating things a little bit here, but philosophically, when they launch a new game, for them it's not, how many units of the game did we ship? Because, you know what? Suppose all of the people who buy that game are low-value customers who never bought from us before and will never buy from us again. The lasting value of that game is nothing. On the other hand, if we can develop a game, and maybe fewer people will buy it, but those who buy it will either become high-value customers or high-value customers who will become even more valuable, then the value of that game could be 1,000x over the number of sales of it. So we shouldn't really be worrying about just what products or what features will sell. We should be saying, what are the things that we can do to enhance value or attract more valuable customers? And so, again, that takes us to the product roadmap, is really the customer roadmap. So it's not so much how can we get those so-so customers to love this product too. I mean, it would be great if we could do that in some really cost-effective way to get them to wake up and enjoy this great product. That would be fine. But in most cases, those same resources will be better allocated to appeal to either come up with features or new products that will be more appealing to the high-value customers. And if the low-value ones want to buy it, like I said before, icing on the cake. We're happy to have them buy it too.
So there's sort of, I don't know that they're emerging, but there are sort of newer industries around service design and experience management. They're sort of coming at this customer centricity maybe from a experience or user kind of a perspective. In your view, how do those intersect with sort of this customer centricity model?
Michael, for the most part, I disagree with the premise. I think that most companies that are going heavy duty into the CX thing are doing it just because they're doing it in a product-centric way. So what experiences can we wrap around the product that will get people to buy it instead of going to Amazon? So I don't think that they're doing it in a customer-centric way. If they're doing it in a customer-centric way, they'd be saying, okay, we got these high-value customers over here. What experiences would be particularly appealing to them, and might be appealing to the others as well. If they're celebrating heterogeneity as they design and evaluate those experiences, then I'm good with it. But if they're doing it in just some kind of one-size-fits-all way, what will make the customer happy, which is really what's going on, then we're just in the same place that we were. And the corollary to that is how they do the measurement. And anytime you're doing any kind of a CX campaign, it should be just like the product example that I just mentioned. What was the CLV of the customers who participated in that campaign before and after? And that's how we're going to find if it's really bringing value or not. And instead, companies are just saying, did it help us sell more product or not? So I don't see CX as being aligned with customer centricity unless companies are doing it that way, which most of them aren't. If anything, they're using it just as a way to almost stick their heads in the sand, and it's the next shiny object that they can chase after, so they don't have to deal with the data and the analytics and the CLVs.
Right. No, that's great. I love that perspective. And you keep using this word CLV. What does that mean? I'm just kidding.
You know what? I got to say this. So everyone understands what the letters mean, but people don't appreciate, how accurate we can make these forecasts. That's kind of frustration number 2, maybe behind the demographics, is people don't trust it. People would rather run their business on backward-looking metrics because they can measure them precisely rather than use forward-looking projections because they're just not sure about it. And so this is my academic thing. I want to teach people not just to trust it, but how to validate it, how to know whether these models are accurate or not. Here are the pictures you want to look at, the tests you want to run. The models work really, really, really well. And let's say if we're talking about retail, in a non-contractual setting, so whether we're talking about retailers or airlines or hotel chains or pharmaceuticals or industrial distribution or mobile games or console games, where there's no contract, it's just people doing things over time and then for whatever reasons they just stop doing it, it's the same model. So you don't necessarily need to develop a custom model for each different sector. I can just take my non-contractual model off the shelf and apply it to the next non-contractual business, B2B or B2C, product or service, doesn't matter. So I'm trying to convince people that CLV is more than just a bunch of letters. It's something real. It's something tangible and validatable. It's broadly applicable. To me, I'm obviously biased, CLV is actually much more practical than the kind of hot topic these days in the analytics space, attribution modeling.
You will find no great.
You come to the wrong podcast.
We got to talk about
somebody who loves attribution.
I'm not going to be critical about attribution. I think it's an important task to want to do, except you can never validate an attribution model. So in other words, and I'm developing in my research too, we can develop the model itself, but we can never know if the attribution, if the assignment of value is correct. We never know what truth is. Whereas with CLV, we can validate it. We can say, over the next 2 years, how many purchases will this person make? Did they or not? So I think we want to start with the stuff that we really can measure and validate. And once we've really exhausted all of the validatable metrics, then let's start bringing in the stuff that's important, but a little bit more of a taking it on faith. So again, I'm not criticizing attribution, but I'm saying I wish companies would first start with CLV. And in fact, when you're doing your attribution model, do it for CLV, not just do it for did we have a conversion or not. So anyway, you get the idea.
Now I've got to ask 2 quick CLV calculation questions.
One, look at this guy.
You say you can use it. So is there a fixed time frame, or does that vary by business? And 2, are you typically discounting? Is it kind of like a net present value where you're discounting the life? So you definitely do that. And then what about the time frame you're picking?
Sure thing. So with the discount rate, absolutely. And if you read any of my papers, you're going to hate me because I always in my papers use 10%. Why? Because that's how many fingers I have. I mean, it's just an arbitrary number. I think it's really, really important for companies to think very carefully about what that discount rate is. At the very least, it should be the weighted average cost of capital. But you might even say, depending on which geographic area we're looking at or which customer segment we're looking at, maybe we should be using a differential discount rate based on the inherent or the expected riskiness of the customer base. These are conversations I was never having until about 2 years ago, until I got my own CLV startup off the ground. And now we're really trying to educate companies about using the right discount rate. So that was question 2. What was the first one on that?
Well, the first one was going to be the time frame, which the discount rate will, it seems like it'll affect when it becomes meaningless because your discount rate's going to give you a natural horizon, won't it?
Absolutely. But to the time frame, goes back to an earlier question that you asked is, again, I want it to be as short as possible. That if I have a really good CLV model and if I can leverage the data across other customers I've acquired in the past, I'm not going to need a long time frame. But to your main point, it does depend that for those new customers that I don't know much about them, and I am going to want to go through several purchase cycles to see if they're staying with me or not. If we're talking about mattresses or refrigerators, it's going to be a little bit longer than if we're talking about a mobile game where it takes me maybe a week to know what their CLV is going to be. So the time frame does matter. But having said that, if we stretch or shrink that time frame, again, recognizing that for refrigerators it's long, for mobile games it's short, the basic patterns of customers doing things over time and how it differs across customers and how they tend to slow down on an individual level, the overall patterns are still remarkably similar.
Cool. Okay, now I'm done.
That's awesome. All right. So now we do have to start to wrap up. This has been a great conversation, and I think we'll probably spearhead a number of additional conversations in the analytics community for sure. One of the things we do on the show is we go around the horn and we share what we call a last call, which is anything that's interesting that we've observed recently. Could be analytics related, not analytics related, or if you have a new book coming out, that'd be great to talk about too. I don't know that you do,
but you should.
Pete, we'll start with you if you have one.
So the cool new thing I mentioned very briefly before is I got this customer centricity simulation coming out. It exists right now, and we're happy to share it. It's a great way, first of all, to get people to understand the difference between product and customer centricity. There's just nothing like jumping behind the driver's seat and say, our job is to build as profitable a customer base as possible. So what kind of customers do we want? How much are we willing to spend on them? How much are we going to allocate to acquisition versus retention and development? Are we going to develop a loyalty program, a CRM system, all of this stuff to really bring these principles to life, but in a really fun, experiential, and competitive kind of way? In early 2018, we're going to have this thing out there broadly for not only for companies to use as kind of an in-house training exercise, but even for individuals to kind of buy it and play the game and just do it for fun. So customer centricity simulation, you heard it here first, and all the cool kids will be doing it soon enough.
Well, is that one that the companies, when they're using it, there'll be some tweaking to make it more real to fit with them, or is it a generic scenario?
At first, it's generic. At first, it's some 3D printing company. It doesn't even matter. The parameters that are in there are pretty realistic, but I think once you get people to appreciate it, then, of course, for me, it's a Trojan horse to lead to some of the academic work. Then it's, okay, company, now give me your data, and we'll kind of build some of the same kinds of models for you to understand how long your customers are staying around, and how do they differ from each other, and how much are they spending, and how responsive are they to different marketing activities. So it's not so much that the sim itself can be tweaked, although I suppose it can be, but it's more to then get companies to just want to not play the game, but to actually do this for real on their own with their own data.
Got it.
Nice. All right, going down the line, Mo, do you have a last call?
I do indeed. I'm stealing Tim's thunder because mine this week is actually an R package, which I just discovered, and I am so excited to try out. So it's the Gmail R package. Now, the reason I think it's really cool and I want to mention it is because lots of analysts, and this is the use case of how we discovered it, lots of analysts get like CSVs that are sent to them automatically to their email. They then download them, then they do a bunch of stuff with them. With the Gmail R package, you can now get it to read your email, download the CSV, do all the stuff that you want to do, and then resend it out via email. So you don't even actually have to open Gmail or Outlook or whatever it is, or Gmail, which is just, yeah, it blew my mind.
If that CSV is a bunch of demographic data, will it just delete the file automatically?
Auto delete. Yeah. So that was my really cool find, and I saw it being used really well the other day in that context.
All right, I'm going to do one, but it's silly. Well, no, it's not silly. Actually, my last call is a podcast, specifically episode 70 of the Digital Analytics Power Hour. So here's why, though. So sort of an Analytics Power Hour first to recommend people to go back and re-listen to this episode. So I've been taking notes this whole time, and there's been like probably 8 or 9 really interesting things to go explore from here that I think our listeners should go back in a time when they could actually jot some of these things down so they don't lose them. There's some really critical marketing ideas and analytical ideas that will advance your life as an analyst pretty significantly. And a lot of it had to do with, us as the hosts of the show, and then also our guests. So, just sort of equal measure, a little bit of balance. That's my attribution. I can't validate that, but that's my attribution. No, I've literally written down about 8 or 9 things that I've just been like, oh yeah, that's, and some of it's really validating too. Like I've been telling our clients for a long time, use the behavioral data to inform persona builds up. Like build them off of behaviors and then bring in this other stuff. Because the people build them just to make soccer moms and, whatever. Anyway, sorry. Tim, what's your last call?
So first I want to call out that Mo actually did more talking than I did as a host this time.
I can't believe it. Can't believe it.
If ever that it's thought that it could not have been done in 70 episodes, it has happened that I was not the one constantly cutting people off.
We can fix that in post editing. So,
So my last call is I'm going to be a Columbus, Ohio homer and call out the Women in Digital Annual Conference, October 25th through 27th. So a past Web Analytics Wednesday Columbus attendee, Elena Scherer, started this like a year and a half or so ago, and I was kind of oblivious to it. But it's 2 things to call out. One, it's a Women in Digital, is there's all this women in analytics kind of momentum going on and a lot of good stuff happening from the DAA, which is awesome. The Women in Digital seems like it's pretty closely. There's women in technology, women in tech as well, kind of West Coast, I think, driven. But one thing that I just thought was really neat, every time there's a women in something, Slack channel, forum, mentor program, there's the can guys be there or not, and it's always kind of a binary. And I just thought it was super clever that the Women in Digital, the annual conference is the only thing where guys are allowed, but it is limited to 4% of their registrants, which I thought was like, that's like a great way to nail it. Like, yep, guys can come, but you are going to be in the extreme minority. So check it out. They've got some pretty cool speakers lined up, and if you're up for heading to beautiful Columbus in the mid-fall, weather's usually pretty good about that time.
And hey, you won't have to line up for the bathroom.
Well put.
Guys never do.
That's true.
Yeah.
Not as common.
I suppose for women, though, at analytics conference, it's normally the only time we don't have to line up, which is the one positive. So
we're working to change that, Mo. We're all working to change that. That's right. Anyway, this, I already kind of made a little bit of an homage to this episode, but I really have enjoyed this, and I think our listeners will probably enjoy it as well. If you've been listening and you've got thoughts, ideas, questions, feel free to reach out to us. Pete, do you use the Twitters or the social medias? Are there ways people could contact you?
I'm big into the Twitter, yes. In fact, that's all the time. I'm finding articles or whatever, blogs about people doing particularly smart or usually dumb things about customer centricity and analytics. So Fader P on the Twitter, happy to link in with people, email, whatever else. I hope you can tell I'm pretty passionate about this stuff, and I'm on a mission to bring these ideas and the metrics associated with them to practice. I appreciate your help in facilitating that, and I'm real glad to engage with anyone else who wants to explore the possibilities.
Feel free to reach out to us with questions. Follow Peter Fader on Twitter. You can find us on our Facebook page, on our Twitter page, and at our website, analyticshour.io, and on the Measure Slack, which we're all part of. And so, again, Peter, real pleasure to have you on the show.
And a privilege to be with you. Well, let's do it again.
This is some really good stuff. So thank you very much. And for my co-hosts, Mo and Tim, out there, everybody, keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget to join the conversation on Twitter or in the Measure Slack. We welcome your comments and questions. Visit us on the web at analyticshour.io or on Twitter @analyticshour.